Good morning, Rob. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you guys doing?
Doing well. What was your relationship like with Mike McCarthy? What was Coach like? We do a weekly Friday interview with him, so we like to get as much dirt as possible to bust his chops. What was Mike like in Green Bay?
So I've covered 5 head coaches here, starting with Mike Holmgren, Ray Rhodes, Mike Sherman, Mike McCarthy, and now Matt LaFleur. And Mike McCarthy was the most regular guy of all of them. Like you can have a conversation with Mike about not about football. He's not one of these all ball all the time kind of guys. And I think it served him well in a place like Green Bay. I mean, you'd see him, all over the place. I mean, you'd see him picking his kids up. You'd see him at high school basketball games. Of course, there was the one infamous incident where he didn't quite agree with one of the referees in one of his stepson's game. But look, that was Mike, for better or worse, it was important to him. And, he still comes back here in the summer. I saw him last summer, the summer before. He still has his house. Not too far from where I live. Little bit different type of subdivision. I will say that though.
I was about to say.
But yeah, I mean, he's just. My son played Little League baseball against his youngest stepson. That's just what Green Bay is like. It's not unusual to see these guys out and about, especially Mike. I mean, that's just he was so much more visible than most. But Green Bay is. Look, we have one Best Buy. If you want to go see Packers players, go to Best Buy on a Tuesday when they're buying on their day off when they're buying electronics. It's just not that unusual around here. And people, I don't want to say they leave guys alone, but it's just normal, right? It's not unusual, and it was never unusual to see Mike McCarthy around town.
Rob, that Bleacher Report piece came at the end of his run. Accusations of laziness, how ugly things got at the end. Yeah. You've been entrenched with that team. What did you make of that McCarthy story?
Look, if you wanted to find somebody to rip Mike McCarthy or Aaron Rodgers, you just had to go to 2 places: Greg Jennings and Jermichael Finley. That's just I don't know. I guarantee you those guys are the sources on that story. For whatever reason, they've got axes to grind. The reporter who wrote that story knew what he was trying to do before he even did it. It was interesting. I mean, there's one part of the story in there that says McCarthy was leaving to get massages, and then later in the story it said, but that might have been made up by another player. I don't know how Bleacher Report works, but at ESPN that would never pass an editor. So, it was, was it time for Mike, probably to part way? Absolutely. And I say that, with a straight face and knowing that I still have a good relationship with Mike. It was time. It had just, run its course, or whatever you want to do, whatever you want to call it. But it doesn't mean that he didn't accomplish a lot here and isn't a good football coach. So I had a lot of issues with that story.
Rob Demovsky, ESPN Packers reporter here on 105.3 The Fan, getting ready for the Mike McCarthy return to Green Bay. So in terms of just qualifications, being a really good coach, all the Sean Payton hype, do you personally think to yourself, why are you trading out McCarthy? He's a fantastic coach. Or were there a lot of questions about him as the Packers head man, especially towards the end?
Yeah, I mean, sure there were. And were there times that he'd call a timeout late in the second half and you were like, what is he doing here? You're only helping the other team? Sure. But, I mean, it happened. Every team, it happens to. You watch, you see it because it's your team, right? But when you look around the league and if you watch, let's just say you picked the Tennessee Titans, for example, and you watched all 17 games of them, you're going to say, what the heck is Mike Vrabel doing here?
Yep.
It's just, and Mike Vrabel's won Coach of the Year before, so I think it's just a really hard job. My thing with that I find interesting about Mike in Dallas is that, to me, Mike McCarthy's greatest strength is as an offensive mind. Yet, as far as I can tell, they're not running his offense. They're running Kellen Moore's offense. So that part of it, I'm not exactly sure, what the dynamic is there. But I do know this, Mike's great in front of the room. Players really like playing for him. And, so maybe that's his bigger role there. Whereas here, he was the offensive play caller, and he was the guy who would work with quarterbacks. Ask him to show you Joe Montana quarterback school tape when he was coaching in Kansas City, and they were doing their off-season workouts. I've seen those tapes, and Mike. Not that Joe Montana needed to coach quarterbacks. It's almost maybe like Mike learned from Joe Montana. Is probably the other way around. Even though Mike was his position coach, but that's where his strength is, coaching quarterbacks. I've seen the old video. Mike showed me that where him and Montana were working out in 1990, whatever that was, in Kansas City. And that's the kind of stuff that he brought to Green Bay. And look, Aaron Rodgers had a weird throwing motion. And Mike McCarthy came here and changed the whole thing. And if he doesn't do that, I'm not sure Aaron Rodgers becomes a 4-time MVP.
What's Aaron Rodgers really like? To all your friends and family who go, Rob, what the hell is up with this dude? What do you tell them?
He's just I think that Ted Thompson, the late general manager, he said something privately that became public when Packers president Mark Murphy was going through the whole thing a year and a half ago where Rodgers wasn't going to play here and all that. And he said to a group of people, and he never should have said this publicly, but he was right. He said, Ted Thompson once told me that Aaron Rodgers is a complicated fella. And I think that's just the way, that's the best way to describe it. I don't think he's a bad guy. I don't know. It's just saying he's a good guy. He's just he's different. He's complicated, and nothing's easy. And that comes with great players. And I remember Mike Holmgren telling me this one time. He goes, having a great quarterback is a blessing and a curse. And he obviously had one in Favre. And I think what he meant was that it's, obviously having those guys gives you every chance to win, but they're also not the easiest guys in the world to deal with because they are so good and they think everything should be done their way. But look, Aaron has evolved through his career. Early in his career, he was boring with us, would never say anything. Now, I mean, I was going to say he says what he means, but sometimes it's in code. That's the part that's hard, is you sort of have to decipher exactly who he's taking a shot at, who he's mad at, who he thinks isn't any good, who he thinks is good. So it's almost like you have to take a lesson in translation of what Aaron Rodgers' language is.
Oh, so he's like your Jerry Jones for us.
Absolutely. Is he declining, or is he just surrounded by poor weapons?
Yeah, I think it's more the latter. But look, he's 38, going to be 39 years old in less than a month. And yeah, skills decline. I don't think he's throwing the ball with any less velocity. Accuracy might be an issue. But then again, how much of that is him not trusting where guys are going to be, where they're supposed to be, things like that. And I think it all goes into it. I think he's let his frustration probably affect his play too, and maybe is becoming indecisive at times. But look, from a pure skill standpoint, I think he's still a really good quarterback. He ran a couple of times in Detroit, and he looked pretty good. He did not look like Tom Brady looked when I saw Tom Brady try to scramble against these guys, and it looked like a weeble wobble running down the middle of the field. Rodgers still can move. He's still got his legs. He's still in great shape physically. I just think there's a little bit of he just doesn't trust what he sees sometimes.
Do they have something against drafting offensive players for him? Because, 11 of the last 12 have been on defense, right?
I believe they've drafted one offensive skill position player in the first round in his time here, and it's a quarterback, right? Yeah. Jordan Love. So, I don't know. Ron Wolf, the general manager here who traded for Favre and built the whole team in the 90s, he's in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And he said at the end of his time here that his biggest regret is not getting Favre more weapons. And, you wonder if at the end of it here, that's going to end up being the same thing here. But on the flip side, they've done really well with guys in the second and third rounds. Devontae Adams was not a first-round pick. And, he was, when he was here, one of the best receivers, if not the best in football. Jordy Nelson was not a first-round pick. He was a second-round pick. Greg Jennings, same thing. James Jones, I believe, was a 3rd-round pick. Randall Cobb, a 2. Like, it's not like they have totally ignored it, but it is interesting that they have not done it. Like when Justin Jefferson was coming out a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, I knew the Packers liked him. I knew Rodgers really, really liked him, and the Vikings traded up ahead of him and got him. Now, if they don't do that and the Packers take Justin Jefferson instead of Jordan Love, the whole narrative could be different.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. But can we say it was the wrong approach with all the winning that they've done there?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it sort of depends on what you want. And I think in Green Bay, even though they call this place Title Town, I think there's this feeling that as long as we're 10, win 10, 11, 12 games every year, and the waiting list of the season ticket holders is 100,000, and the area around the stadium is massively developed with businesses and things that they own, and that people are streaming in and out of that pro shop. And, I joke that you could take your dog dropping, stamp a G on it, and someone would pay $19.99 for it in the Packers pro shop. There is a feeling. I don't know that it's necessarily, how pervasive it is, but there's a feeling in this town and even within the organization that that's good enough. That from a management front office standpoint. Now, I guarantee you, the football people don't feel that way. The general manager doesn't feel that way. The coaching staff doesn't feel that way. But from a business front office standpoint, there's a little bit of a feeling that, hey, as long as we're winning 10, 11, 12 games every year, it's all good. And, does that somehow impact their ability to, quote unquote, go for it? I'm not sure.
Do Rodgers' teammates like him, and has the front office relationship been mended?
It's definitely been mended. I think, and he'll admit this, sometimes you have to go through like a conflict to resolve it. And that was one of the things, getting back to McCarthy, that Rodgers always, I think, appreciated until he decided he was not going to believe in his system anymore at the end, but was that they could talk through conflict. I mean, that they could have disagreements and they would hash it out and it would be better. And that's what happened in the off season of 2021, where, they took a while, but they finally came to a place where Rodgers was able to air his grievances, and the general manager was able to say, yeah, you know what, you're right, I need to do this, and we will do this. I think that part of it, has been good going forward. I think when you get to be 38 years old in the locker room, it's really hard to have relationships with guys.
Yeah.
I remember at the end of Favre's career, he talking to him, and he was like, my daughter's closer in age to some of my teammates than I am, and I could tell at the end, like Favre would, he would hang out more with the media. He'd play golf with us more than he'd play with his teammates sort of at the end of it, because he just didn't have a lot of friends left. Rodgers has guys like Randall Cobb, which is why he wanted him back here. David Bakhtiari, Mercedes Lewis, Mason Crosby, the kicker. But I mean, you look next to him, the guys in his locker, next to him in his locker are 15 years younger than him, and in some cases more. So, it's just a hard thing for an older player, especially if you're trying to, please him as a receiver or something like that. It's just difficult.
Hey, real quick, who's the quarterback in 2 years? And if it's not Jordan Love, where is he?
In 2 years, it's not Aaron Rodgers. I did a story ran yesterday on ESPN.com about kind of what their options are for Rodgers moving forward. If he were to want to, be traded, if they wanted to move on, more from a salary cap standpoint. But Mike Tannenbaum, the former general manager of the Jets and Dolphins, who now works for ESPN, said something interesting to me. He said, you have to play Jordan Love, and you have to play him this year. He's like, they're not going to win a Super Bowl this year. Now, the Packers will no way would they take Rodgers out until they were officially eliminated, but I don't know that they'll do this. But he said they have to play Jordan Love, because if Aaron Rodgers decides he's going to play here for 2 more years and you trade Jordan Love and he used the Atlanta Falcons for a 3rd-round pick, and then Love ends up being a 10-year starter for the Atlanta Falcons, then you botched it. So, somehow, some way, they've got to figure out between now and the end of the season if Jordan Love is their guy. And maybe they know. Maybe they know he is. Maybe they know he's not, and that's fine. But from an outside perspective, I don't see how they know.
Rob, this was fantastic. Thank you so much. We've been wanting to get you on for a while. Enjoy the game on Sunday, and we'll tell Mike you said hello tomorrow.
Yeah, for sure. Please do. And I guarantee you, if you say, hey, Demovsky said hi, he'll say, well, how's his son doing at basketball? Because he always loves to ask about my oldest son's a senior in high school. His basketball team's preseason number 1 in the state. Whoa. And in fact, Mike called me the other night asking me, well, what's the outlook for him to play basketball? That's my best Mike McCarthy impersonation.
Awesome stuff. Thank you, Rob.
All right, guys, we'll be seeing you.